I actually did a poll in my group chat the other day, 3 or 4 days ago. So 6 men in there. And I polled them. I said, who do you want to win the election? And 4 of them said Trump. My position, actually, which I've not really ever shared publicly, is that I see no great option.
Oh, perfect's not on the menu.
Yeah, I see no great option.
Yeah.
So I'm like, and the things that, again, I think a lot about are the wars that are going on around the world. So I ask myself, who will stop the wars? And I think a little bit about the economy. And then also, from a selfish perspective, think about my ability to build businesses, to get visas in the US and those kinds of things.
Yep.
And I also think about women's reproductive rights, because I think that's an issue that's quite close to my heart. But why are men choosing Trump?
So this is an unusual election in the sense that neither of these candidates, based on their metrics, has ever been elected before. We've never had, since maybe Roosevelt, was it Roosevelt or Truman actually, have we had a president, an incumbent party, be reelected when they have less than a 50% approval. So if Harris gets elected, it's almost a first-time occurrence that an incumbent administration this unpopular gets reelected. Trump never cracked 50% approval. No presidential candidate who has never been above 50% has ever been reelected. So whoever wins, it's an unprecedented election of someone who typically does not get reelected. In terms of men, what you've seen is young men are going more conservative, young women are going slightly more progressive. And that has a lot of unfortunate ramifications because, again, it's another reason why young people are not getting together and mating. It's yet another reason not to date somebody. When I was your age, I was thinking about this when I was dating. For the life of me, if I went through every person I've dated in my 20s and 30s, I don't remember what their political affiliation was. I didn't care. We didn't talk about that. It was like, are you fun? I'm fun. Are you attracted to me? I'm not, like, let's go out, let's drink, let's see where this goes. We didn't talk about politics. So it's a shame because now politics is now kind of a gender divide. So it's having social ramifications. I would argue that young men are not going to the Republican Party. They're actually less conservative, or people have this image of young men that their knuckles are dragging along the ground. They actually are almost as in favor of gender rights as young women. What I would argue is that they're leaving the Democratic Party because if you go to the DNC, the Democratic Party's website, there's a section that says who we serve. Click on it. And it says, these are the constituents in America that we serve, that we advocate for. And it lists 16 demographic groups ranging from Asians and Pacific Islanders, the disabled, seniors, Black Americans, veterans. It goes through all of these groups. And I tried to add it up, and I think it adds up to 76% of the US population. But similar to kind of the DEI apparatus on campus now or on university campuses, when you're purposely advocating and trying to advantage 76% of the population, you're not advantaging 76% of the population or advocating for them. You're discriminating against the 24%. And that 24% are squarely one group. It's young men. And if you look at the Democratic National Convention, it was a parade of demographic groups, but not one mentioned the group that has fallen furthest, fastest in the United States, and that's young men. Families and young men feel this, right? We don't have an opioid or a homeless crisis in the United States. We have a male opioid and a male homeless crisis. 3 out of 4 opioid addicts, 3 out of 4 homeless people are men, right? 3 times as likely to kill themselves, 12 times as likely to be incarcerated. Women under the age of 30 are now making more money than men. More single women own homes than single men. And by the way, we should never do anything to get in the way of that. That's a remarkable victory for us. But a lot of young men and their families feel that these young men are really struggling, and they are not seen by the Democratic Party. Because the Democratic Party, I would argue that our big failure over the last 20 years is that we've become sort of these self-appointed cops of social justice and have tried to lecture the nation on what is the right social policy or behaviors, and that America has pretty squarely rejected this. The example I use is the University of Michigan, an amazing university, has invested $150 million in DEI, social policy, and the number of complaints about racism is up 30-fold. The sentiment, the feeling about America has all gone down. And so the Democrats have decided we're about social policy as opposed to the economic policies that are actually going to impact you. And a large part of America has sort of rejected it. Young men do not feel seen by the Democratic Party. And it's not only just young men, but it's their families. So I would argue it's not so much that they're moving to the Republican Party as they're moving away from the Democratic Party. But there's just to use this overused term, young men do not feel seen by the Democratic Party. It's like you're fighting for everyone except for me. And let's be honest, my group is not doing well. The group that has ascended the fastest globally is women. Twice as many women in the last 30 years elected to some form of parliament. More women globally now are seeking tertiary education than men. By the way, again, a huge victory for all of us. Fantastic. But there's this analogy that Chris Williams, the podcast that kind of reminds me a little bit of you, uses, and he calls it the high heels effect. And that is 50% of women say they won't date someone who's shorter than them. I bet it's more like 80%. It's just an embarrassing thing to say. And it's very instinctual because women at some point are more vulnerable because of pregnancy and raising kids. And they want someone who instinctively they feel could physically protect them. So they tend to be not attracted to a man shorter than them. Metaphorically, women are getting taller and taller each year, making more money, more college attendance. They're just killing it. More and more people elected to positions of power and influence. Men are getting shorter and shorter. So in sum, we've talked about this. Women mate socioeconomically horizontally and up, men horizontally and down. The pool of horizontal and up among men is smaller. And when men don't have the prospect of a romantic relationship, they come off the rails. Women oftentimes will reinvest that energy in friendships and work. Men reinvest that energy in vaping and video games and porn. Men without the prospect of a romantic relationship, look at the most violent, unstable places in the world. They all have a preponderance of things, and that is a bunch of men with very little economic or romantic opportunities. And so you have a cohort of not only young men, but families that are upset and angry about this cohort, maybe unfairly expectant around what they should expect from the American economy, but they're not doing well. And they feel seen by the Republican Party and Trump, who are pushing back on many of these social policies, that the snake is eating its own tail, that it's gone so far to the progressive that at the end of the day, it's no longer promoting the rights of non-whites, for example. 60 years ago, 12 Black people at Princeton, Harvard, and Yale, that's a problem. 2/3 of Harvard's freshman class now identifies as non-white. And somehow, as a non-white male that's not making as much money, that's more inclined to be an addict or gambling, that owns fewer homes, somehow I'm still the enemy. I'm still like, I've been told by media that I'm kind of should have collective guilt because of the privilege my dad or my granddad received. So there's I think, justifiable anger and a feeling that the Democratic Party has really moved away from young men.